They called me a deadbeat dad. For 20 years, that's all my daughter knew about me, because that's all her mother ever told her. I wasn't there for birthdays, graduations, or even Christmas mornings. Not because I didn't want to be, but because every time I tried, I was turned away. What she never knew was that while she thought I'd abandoned her, I was working 16-hour days, sleeping in my truck, and saving every cent I could. For 2 decades, I kept my head down, building a business in silence. No one in her world knew the truth, that I was growing something worth nearly $500,000. I told myself I was doing it for the day we'd reunite, for the moment I could give her the life she deserved. But as the years passed, the distance grew, and the version of me she believed in became the only one she could see. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was her. The first time she'd called me in years. My heart raced. I thought maybe, just maybe, she was ready to talk. But the words that came out of her mouth froze me in place. "Dad, I need money." She had no idea what was coming next, and neither did I. Because the truth I was about to reveal would shatter everything she thought she knew about her father. I was 28 when my daughter was born, and from the moment I held her in my arms, I promised myself I would give her everything I never had. Back then, life was simple. I worked construction, hard, honest labor that left me sore at night but proud in the morning. The smell of sawdust clung to my clothes, and my hands were calloused, but when I came home to her giggles and my wife's smile, it was worth every drop of sweat. The first cracks appeared quietly, almost invisibly. Arguments that started over money turned into accusations. She said I was never home, that I cared more about work than my own family. I thought I was providing. She thought I was absent. We stopped touching, stopped laughing, stopped being a team. Then, one rainy Tuesday, she told me she wanted a divorce. Our daughter was 4. The court gave her primary custody. My visiting rights were every other weekend, and even those felt like borrowed time. I fought for more, but the legal bills piled up faster than I could pay them. "He's irresponsible," she told the judge. "He can't be trusted." I swallowed my pride because I thought fighting harder might hurt my daughter more than help. But the first time I saw her run into her mother's arms and glance past me like I was a stranger, something broke inside me. Still, I tried. I showed up at her school just to wave when she came out. I brought her favorite snacks to soccer practice, standing by the fence because I wasn't allowed inside. One afternoon, she saw me, smiled, and waved back. That one small moment kept me going. I didn't know then that the storm was only beginning. Soon, the stories began to spread. Friends of the family stopped returning my calls. My own parents, influenced by her words, started to look at me differently. "He walked out on his daughter," she told anyone who'd listen. "Never paid a dime unless I begged." The truth was, I'd never missed a payment, but her version became the only one that mattered. And my daughter, she was too young to know the difference. At first, I pushed back. I tried to correct the lies, to defend myself. But every time I did, it came back to me through mutual friends. "You're just making it worse." Lawyers told me custody battles could take years and cost tens of thousands of dollars with no guarantee of winning. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I stepped back. Not because I didn't love her, but because I couldn't afford to fight a war I might lose. That's when the work began. 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Construction in the mornings, handyman jobs in the evenings, odd jobs on weekends. I slept in my truck between shifts to save on gas and rent. Every dollar I didn't need for food or bills went into a savings account I swore I'd use for her one day. I imagined walking into her life years later, not empty-handed, but with something to show for my absence. But the more time passed, the more the distance between us grew. She stopped looking at me when I dropped off checks. Birthdays became awkward exchanges on doorsteps, with her mother standing behind her, arms crossed. The last time I brought her a gift, a bike I'd fixed up myself, her mother took it from me before she could even touch it. "We don't need your charity," she said, slamming the door. I drove away that night and parked in a grocery store lot. I sat there in the dark, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I wanted to scream, to punch the dashboard, to demand someone listen. Instead, I closed my eyes and told myself what I'd told myself 100 times before. One day, she'll know. One day, she'll see I never left her. That promise became my anchor through summers that scorched the skin off my back and winters that froze my fingertips. I kept working. I didn't see her grow from a little girl into a teenager. I didn't hear about her first crush or watch her learn to drive. But I was building something, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, that I prayed would mean something when the time finally came. And yet, every mile I drove to a job site, every nail I hammered, I couldn't shake the image of her standing in a doorway, looking at me like I was nothing more than a shadow from a story she'd been told. I wondered if the day I revealed the truth would heal us, or if it would be too late. By the time my daughter was 9, my absence had become part of the story she told herself about me. Each visit felt colder than the last. She'd greet me with a polite, "Hi," eyes darting away, as if she was already counting down the minutes until I left. Conversations were short, safe, about school, about the weather, never about feelings. I could feel the wall between us growing taller every year, brick by brick, each one cemented by her mother's voice in her ear. Holidays were the worst. On her birthdays, I'd show up with carefully chosen gifts, the kind I thought might prove I knew her. A sketch pad because she once mentioned liking to draw. A jacket in her favorite color. But no matter what I brought, her mother would stand there, smiling that tight, rehearsed smile, and say thank you to your father, as if it were a chore. At Christmas, I once gave her a telescope after she told me she loved looking at the stars. Her mother's comment, delivered right in front of me, was a dagger. "Well, maybe you can look for your father up there. He's about as distant as one." My daughter laughed politely, not realizing the joke cut deeper than any insult I'd ever heard. I tried to make up for lost time with grand gestures. Tickets to her favorite band, a weekend trip to the science museum. But instead of bridging the gap, it reinforced the idea her mother had planted, that I was trying to buy my way into her life. She accepted the gifts, but kept her heart closed. Still, I never stopped showing up. Even if I only got an hour with her, I made the drive. I told myself consistency mattered, even if the moments felt hollow. I believed, hoped, that one day the years of effort would mean something. Then one Saturday afternoon, something shifted. I found her sitting in the driveway, her bike upside down, the chain tangled. I offered to help, half expecting her to shrug me off. Instead, she handed me a wrench without a word. I crouched beside her explaining each step as I worked. How to loosen the rear wheel, slip the chain back on, adjust the tension. She listened, eyes following my hands. And then, just as I tightened the last bolt, she smiled. It wasn't much, just a quick curve of her lips. But it was real. For a moment, it felt like I had my little girl back. We tested the bike together, her pedaling down the street while I jogged behind. The afternoon sun caught her hair, and I thought, this is it. This is the moment the wall starts to crumble. But before the thought could settle, a car pulled up. Her mother stepped out, her expression already sharp. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, as if I'd committed some crime. "She was fixing her bike," I said calmly, still catching my breath. "She doesn't need your help," she snapped, walking over and placing a hand on our daughter's shoulder. "Come on, we're leaving." My daughter hesitated, glancing at me just long enough for me to see something flicker in her eyes. Confusion, maybe even guilt. But then she looked away and followed her mother to the car. No goodbye, no thank you. The door slammed, and they were gone. I stood in the driveway, the sound of the engine fading into the distance, the smell of motor oil still on my hands. That small spark I'd felt minutes earlier was snuffed out as quickly as it appeared. Driving home that day, I gripped the steering wheel and tried to swallow the anger rising in my chest. Every time I got close, every time I thought I saw a way through to her, it was ripped away. And no matter how much I told myself to be patient, there was a voice in the back of my head whispering that maybe I was fighting a battle I'd already lost. But I couldn't let go. I'd already missed too much. First days of school, school plays, scraped knees, and bedtime stories. I wasn't going to add "gave up" to that list. Even if I had to take 100 steps back for every one step forward, I was going to keep showing up. I just didn't know that the next time she reached out to me, it wouldn't be for a bike repair or a day at the park. It would be for something that would test every promise I'd ever made to myself and force me to decide whether the truth was worth the risk of losing her forever. 2 decades had passed since the divorce, and the life I'd been building in the shadows was finally real. What had started with odd jobs and nights sleeping in my truck had grown into a construction business worth $450,000. I had crews working under me, steady contracts, and a small office with my name on the door. I'd done it quietly, never flaunting it, never letting my daughter's mother catch wind of it. Part of me thought that when the time came, I'd reveal it like a gift. Proof that my absence had a purpose. It was a Tuesday morning in late autumn when my phone rang. The number wasn't familiar, but the voice on the other end froze me in place. "Hi, Dad." 2 words, soft and hesitant, but unmistakable. It was her. My heart pounded like it had when I first held her as a baby. We exchanged a few pleasantries, awkward and stilted. I wanted to ask 100 questions. "How are you? Are you happy? Do you hate me?" But I held back. Then she took a deep breath and said, "I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important. I need your help. Financial help." For a brief second, hope flared in me. Maybe she wanted to start a business, go back to school, something I could support to help her build a future. "What's going on?" I asked. She hesitated, then admitted, "I'm getting divorced. He left me with all the debt. I need $20,000 to pay it off before they take the house." The words landed like a punch to the gut. It wasn't about reconnecting. It wasn't about forgiveness or curiosity. It was about money. The same old story I'd lived with for years, only now it was coming from her directly. My first instinct was to say no. The years of cold shoulders, the birthdays missed, the way she'd believed every lie her mother told. Part of me wanted to tell her I owed her nothing. My hand tightened around the phone. But then, out of nowhere, a memory rose up. She was 6 years old, standing on a playground in a pink jacket, running toward me after not seeing me for months. I'd knelt down, and she'd thrown her arms around my neck, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. It was the only time I'd ever felt her choose me over the noise around her. That hug had carried me through the darkest nights. I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. "All right," I said. "But before I give you a dime, we need to talk. In person." There was a pause. "Talk about what?" she asked cautiously. "About the last 20 years, I said. "About what really happened." She agreed, reluctantly, setting a time for the following weekend. After we hung up, I sat at my desk staring at the framed photo of her I kept hidden in the bottom drawer. She was 8 in that picture, smiling awkwardly in front of a birthday cake. I'd taken it from a distance because her mother wouldn't let me close. I knew this wasn't just about paying off her debt. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the one I'd imagined 1,000 different ways. And it couldn't be a lecture or a list of grievances. It had to be the truth, laid out plainly, backed up by everything I'd sacrificed. That night, I pulled out boxes from my storage unit, pay stubs from the early years, worn notebooks tracking every dollar saved, photos of me covered in dust on job sites at 2 a.m. I even found the first invoice I'd ever written under my business's name. But the most unexpected discovery stopped me cold. A yellowed envelope, sealed, with my name on it. The handwriting was hers, my daughter's mother. I recognized it instantly. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter, written 15 years ago, admitting what I'd always suspected. I told her you didn't care because I didn't want her to choose you over me. She confessed that she'd exaggerated my absences, twisted stories, and used her control over visitation to make sure I stayed the villain. I sat there for a long time, the letter in one hand, my daughter's voice from earlier echoing in my head. This changed everything. I wasn't just going to give her money. I was going to give her the truth. Something her mother had stolen from both of us for decades. For the rest of the week, my office looked less like a place of business and more like an evidence room. I spread everything across the desk. Photographs curled at the edges, grainy phone videos of me on job sites in the dead of night, stacks of old invoices, and dog-eared notebooks full of my spidery handwriting. Every page told a piece of the story I'd been living alone for 20 years. The letter from her mother sat at the center, its creases worn from the number of times I'd opened and closed it in disbelief. I still wasn't sure how I felt. Vindicated, yes, but also robbed. 15 years stolen from us because of a lie she put in ink. I slipped the letter into a plastic sleeve, not to protect it, but to make sure it was seen for exactly what it was. Proof. I went through photo albums and pulled images from the years we'd been apart. Me fixing roofs under floodlights, unloading lumber in the snow, napping in the cab of my truck with a blanket wrapped around me. I edited together short clips from old camcorder tapes, each stamped with dates so she could see just how many nights I traded sleep for progress. Then came the financial records. I laid them out in order, starting with my first $500 profit, moving forward year by year until the figure reached $450,000. I didn't want to overwhelm her with numbers, but I knew they had to be there. Every cent earned was a counterpoint to the version of me she'd been told existed. By Saturday morning, I had everything packed into a single leather portfolio. It wasn't flashy, but it carried the weight of 2 decades. We met at a small cafe just outside of town. Neutral ground. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, with her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. She looked older than the girl I remembered. Of course she did. But there was still something in her eyes I recognized, though I couldn't name it. "Thanks for coming," I said, sliding into the chair across from her. She nodded, but didn't smile. "You said you wanted to talk?" I placed the portfolio on the table and opened it slowly. "I've been working for 20 years, I began, not because I didn't care, but because I wanted to give you something when the time was right. And I think that time is now." I handed her a photograph, the first of many. "That's me, in 2004, roofing a warehouse at 2 in the morning. I'd just finished my second job of the day." She glanced at it briefly before setting it down. I passed her another. Me, younger, hair dusted white with plaster. Then another, me standing beside my first company truck, a beater with my business name stenciled on the side. "This," I said, flipping open a notebook, "is the ledger from my first year. I made $5,000 profit. By year 10, I was over $200,000. Last year," I slid a printed statement across the table. "The business was valued at $450,000. Her brow furrowed, but she didn't say anything. Then I reached for the letter. My hands were steady as I slid it toward her. "This is from your mother, written 15 years ago. I think you should read it." She hesitated, then opened it. Her eyes moved across the page slowly, the crease between her brows deepening. I watched her face change. Confusion, disbelief, then something else I couldn't read. When she finished, she folded the letter carefully and set it back on the table. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The noise of the cafe filled the space between us, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of voices. Finally, she stood. "I need to go," she said quietly. "Wait," I said, reaching out, but stopping short of touching her hand. "Please, I need to think," she cut in. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, and there was something in them. Pain, maybe, or anger, but it vanished before I could be sure. She turned and walked out, the bell above the door jingling as it closed behind her. I sat there for a long time, the portfolio still open in front of me, the letter lying exactly where she'd left it. I'd imagined this meeting ending in tears or even an argument, anything but silence. Silence felt like the worst outcome of all. When I finally left, the afternoon sun was already dipping low, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I carried the portfolio back to my truck, heavier now than when I'd walked in. It wasn't the weight of the papers or the photos. It was the weight of not knowing whether I'd just built a bridge or burned the last one I had left. 3 days after the cafe meeting, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't my daughter. It was her mother. I hadn't heard her voice in years, and even now, it still carried that same sharp edge I remembered. "We need to talk," she said, without preamble, "about that letter." I didn't say anything, just let the silence stretch until she continued. "You can't show it to anyone," she said, her tone low, almost pleading. "It was written in anger. It's not the truth now. If my family sees it, they'll know the truth." I cut in. Her voice rose. "Ethan, I'm serious. You'll destroy everything. My relationships, my standing." I almost laughed at that. She'd destroyed my relationship with my daughter years ago and never flinched. Now she was afraid of losing face. You destroyed something a lot more important than your standing, I said. You took 20 years from me. There was a pause, then a different kind of urgency in her tone. Please, I'm asking you, don't do this. I didn't promise her anything. I hung up without another word. That night, I got a message from my daughter. It was short. Dinner at Aunt Linda's this Sunday. Be there. I didn't think much of it until Sunday evening, when I pulled up to her aunt's house and saw the number of cars parked outside. Stepping into the living room, I froze. The whole extended family was there. Her aunts, uncles, cousins. Conversation stopped the moment I walked in. My daughter was standing near the dining table. She looked different, steadier somehow, as if the days since the cafe had aged her in a good way. In her hands was a stack of papers. "Dad," she said, meeting my eyes. "Sit down." I took a seat at the table, my chest tight. Then she turned to face the room. "I found something," she said. "Something you all need to read." She passed copies of the letter around, her voice calm but unwavering. For years, I believed my dad didn't care about me, that he never showed up, never tried. I thought it was his choice. But this, she tapped the paper, proves otherwise. I watched as her mother's family read the words. Shock rippled across their faces. Aunt Linda's hand went to her mouth. One of her uncles muttered, "My God." Her mother sat stiffly in the corner, her knuckles white where she gripped the arm of her chair. "That letter was a mistake," she said quickly. "It was private." "No," my daughter interrupted, her voice cutting through the room. "It was a confession. You lied to me. You lied to all of us. And you made me treat my father like a stranger for most of my life." Her mother's eyes darted to me, but I stayed silent. This wasn't my moment. It was hers. My daughter turned then, meeting my gaze. She crossed the room, standing beside me. Her hand rested lightly on my shoulder as she faced the family again. "This is my dad," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "And he was always there, just not the way you told me." For a moment, the room was completely still. Then Aunt Linda spoke. "Ethan, I'm sorry. We didn't know." Others murmured agreement, some unable to meet my eyes. I didn't need their apologies, but hearing them felt like the weight I'd carried for 20 years was finally shifting. My daughter sat down next to me, her hand still on my arm. I could feel the smallest tremor in her touch, and I knew she was holding back tears. So was I. Her mother stood abruptly, muttering something about needing air, and left the room. No one followed her. As dinner was served, the conversations slowly returned, this time with me included. People asked about my business, my work, my life. It was strange, like stepping into an alternate version of the last 20 years, where I'd never been exiled. Later, as we were leaving, my daughter walked me to my truck. The night air was cool, and for a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I can't change the past, Dad, but I can decide what happens next." I swallowed the lump in my throat. That's all I ever wanted. She smiled, small, but real. "See you soon." As I drove away, I realized this wasn't just a turning point for us. It was the first chapter of something we were finally building together. In the weeks after that dinner, the ripples spread quickly. Word traveled through the family, and for the first time in decades, the version of me they carried wasn't the one her mother had painted. Phone calls came, some awkward, some heartfelt. Apologies arrived in hesitant phrases, not because they thought it would erase the years, but because they finally understood what had been taken from me. Her mother, on the other hand, withdrew. The extended family stopped inviting her to gatherings. Old friendships in that circle grew cold. Doors quietly closed. I didn't take any satisfaction in it. If anything, it was bittersweet. I had fought for 20 years to be heard, but I'd never wanted to win at her expense, at least not like this. My daughter called more often now. Sometimes it was just to check in, sometimes to ask for advice. One afternoon, she came to my office with a proposal. "I've been thinking," she said, setting a folder on my desk. "You've been running this business on your own all these years. I think I can help you take it further." We spent hours going through her ideas, marketing strategies, online outreach, ways to streamline the bidding process. She had a sharp mind and an instinct for numbers I recognized immediately. Within a month, she was officially part of the company. Watching her walk into the office each morning, coffee in hand, ready to work alongside me, was something I'd never dared to picture before. It wasn't just about the business. Working together meant sharing lunches, trading stories, filling in the blanks of all those lost years. I learned about her favorite books, her stubborn streak in school, the way she still liked to look at the stars at night. She learned about the years I spent chasing jobs across state lines, the sleepless nights, the moments I almost gave up. For the first time in decades, I felt like a father in the present, not just a ghost from the past. It wasn't perfect. There were still silences when certain memories hovered too close, but it was real. One evening, after a long day on a job site, we sat outside the office on the tailgate of my truck, eating takeout. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the gravel lot. She was quiet for a while, then said, "You know, I used to think you just didn't want me, that there was something wrong with me." I turned to look at her, but she kept her eyes on the horizon. "I know better now," she said, "and I'm sorry it took me so long." "You don't have to be sorry," I told her. "You only knew what you were told. The important thing is we're here now." She nodded, a faint smile on her lips. As the months passed, the business grew with her help. Clients noticed the difference, and so did I. But beyond the numbers, the greatest change was in the quiet comfort between us. No more forced small talk, no more careful politeness, just the easy rhythm of two people who had decided, finally, to be in each other's lives. Then one night in early spring, she came over for dinner. We ate in my kitchen, laughing about a mix-up with a supplier. The kind of ordinary moment I used to think was impossible. After we cleared the dishes, she lingered at the table, tracing patterns on the wood with her fingertip. "Dad," she said softly, "do you think we can fix Mom someday?" The question caught me off guard. I studied her face, looking for anger or resentment, but there was none. Just a quiet hope. "I don't know," I admitted. "Some things take longer to heal than we'd like. And some people, they have to want to fix themselves first." She nodded slowly. "I guess I don't want her to be alone. I know what she did was wrong, but she's still my mom." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. "If there's ever a way to mend that bridge, I'll help you, but we'll take it one step at a time." Her smile then was different. Soft, almost relieved. The moment hung between us, not as a promise, but as an opening. When she left that night, I stood at the door and watched her walk to her car. The air was cool, the stars just beginning to appear. I thought of all the years I'd looked at those same stars, wondering if she ever thought of me. Now, I knew she did. And more importantly, I knew she always would. Some truths take years to surface. Some wounds take decades to mend. But sometimes, if you're patient enough, the light finds its way through.